what it does is marketing and sales are two different components. And people have argued with me when I've told people what I believe marketing is and what I believe sales is, but I'm going to do it again. And maybe we can have a discussion about it. Sales are immediate drivers of money. If you are like you are sending someone to a landing page to buy that moment. Marketing is about lowering the cost of the sale later. And so when you are on all of these podcasts or doing these guest blog posts or doing in these Facebook groups, doing group takeovers or whatever the thing you're doing joint ventures, what you're doing is not necessarily making a sale today. What you're doing is driving people into your mailing list or just getting the exposure so that the 10th time they see you, the next time they see you with a sales driver in front of them, they will buy.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
This has been a really fascinating discussion, but we spent all of our time just on the first question. So I do want to move on a little bit. I got a couple other questions I want to ask you just in relation to your story, right? So my next question for you is sort of your superpower in business, right? What you do or build or offer this world that really helps solve problems for people. And the way I've been framing this for my guests over the past couple of months has been like, if you look at all the skill sets that you've built, over the course of your business career, what's the sort of the one skill that's the common thread that sort of empowers everything else that you do, that sort of lets you, show off your skills, I guess?
Sure, it's building a community. The main part of that, building hype for a product before it launches, and building the community that's strong and engaged and ready to buy the products that we have is definitely the superpower. It goes back to the Build a Rabid fan base course and why I've had success with Kickstarter, why I have a pretty good name in the creative community as far as like being creator first. And but yeah, it's definitely that building a community portion of it, which is weird because my community isn't so engaged. Like I don't get a ton of replies to my emails that I put out. But I do get that when I put out a product, or when I'm when I'm about to launch a product and I'm putting out free stuff, or when I'm doing blog posts, I feel it, and then it kind of coalesces for me right around a product launch.
Absolutely. So my question for you is, a superpower like that, do you think that it's something that you can develop, right? Batman developed his ninja skills, or is that something that is just built in, Clark Kent and his superpowers that just came with him?
Oh no, I definitely think it's learnable, because I was wholly unlikable for many, many years of my life. I was very polarizing. People would either love me or really hate me. So I had to learn how to sort of tamp down that and how to find those people. And I think that it's something that literally anybody can develop, and you have a part of it in you. That's even the easier part, is you have all of this, the ability to create resonance and build a community that really connects with you. It's all in there now. It just takes honing and carving out. And there's a book called The Attractive Character, or a concept called The Attractive Character, which really helped me know what I have to be like in my when I present myself, so that the right people would resonate with me, and then they take a chance with me in the Complete Creative, or they take a chance on my books. I write like I talk. I talk like I teach. And so my goal then is to be the most not over the top, but kind of over the top example of
Yeah,
myself when I do these, because I
we
want
call
to
that
break the
having a
noise.
distinct personality.
Right,
Yeah, we call that
exactly.
having your distinct personality. So like in your comic book realm, right? Every superhero has their distinct personality, the way that they act and present themselves to the world, and you accentuate the good parts, right? Accentuate, or not even necessarily the good parts, the parts that you want to accentuate. So like in the marketing world, just one of the examples that I know a lot of my audience will resonate with is a guy by the name of Dan Kennedy, right? So Dan Kennedy is sort of like the father of modern direct response marketing, and he's famous for his no bullshit, right? That's his all of his books were the no bullshit, whatever, and that's what he did all this stuff, and he taught that way, and he comes out across when he speaks and teaches as almost kind of gruff, right? Gruff, no bullshit. This is the way it is, and that's his distinct personality. But if you meet him in person, like that you realize that he's pushing that, right? He's accentuating that part of his
Hmm.
personality because it's part of the brand, right?
Right.
So it's figuring out what is your distinct personality and how do you emphasize that when you communicate with your audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the flip side then of your superpower is your fatal flaw, right? So just like Superman had his kryptonite, or Batman was, not actually a superhero, he was just rich and dedicated. What is something that you have struggled with in growing your business over the years, that you've had to sort of fight against, right? And more importantly, how have you sort of overcome that for people in our audience who might struggle with the same thing you did?
I'm gonna do it. Well, last year I was suicidal because I tied myself too much to my self-worth of how my company did. So I've struggled with depression and anxiety since I was a kid, and it got really bad right around this time last year. And God, it was really bad. I was having some product launches that were going very, very bad. Products I developed for years, that were like, I spent $14,000-15,000 on this product, and I made $2,000 on it back in like the first 6. Like, it was like I had, it was a bloodbath. And so I really had to learn, that my self-worth, that I had self-worth that was intrinsic to myself, even when even outside of the success or failure of a product. Like, I still deserve to exist, and I still had value, and people still liked me, even if my product blew up, which is very hard for me. I put a lot of myself into my products, and I know I do a lot of market testing, and to have products that like didn't do well, just really like gassed me on a personal level. Because of how much I put into it, like, I think is like of myself and of what I think my audience will like. And so I had to learn. So it came down to something really simple. Like, I would call myself a success or a failure. And it's really hard because you think that if you start at 0 and you go up to 50 and then back to 49, like, you will have succeeded, and at the aggregate, and your brain would think that like you were a success now. But that's not how it works. Your brain, if you go to 50, that becomes the new baseline. And if you go even to 49, like, suddenly you're a failure. And so your
Yeah.
brain shorts out. It's very hard to short your brain out in that respect. And it's really fun to tie your self-worth to your product as you're on the way up. But for every up, there is a down. And so I really had to learn how to separate it. And how I did that was, I started thinking of myself like, I am not a failure or a success. I am a person who succeeds or a person who fails. I am also a person who writes, and a person who eats, and a person who walks, and a person who does all of these things. And if suddenly I could no longer walk, I would still have value as a person. So if I stopped being a success, I would still have value as a person, and it would exist outside of this realm. And it really, that helped. I can say that the last couple launches that we've had have been successful. We ended up breaking even on that book series after relaunching it on Kickstarter, and actually paying not just for that, but for a whole nother a series of books. So, but that was easily the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. And it's something that has really helped me in this time of that we're going through now, because I know that, like, if this was a year ago, I probably would have killed myself already. But because of what I've done in the past year, I've been able to maybe not enjoy it. I don't think anyone's enjoying it, but to at least be able to weather it with a more positive mental outlook. Sorry, I
Well,
got
I
dark
for
there.
one I for one am very glad that you chose to continue your story and have you here. But on that, it reminds me of something I just read a book by Jordan Peterson called The 12 Rules for Life, and the first chapter of that book he tells a story about lobsters. And lobsters have they have the same sort of serotonin dopamine receptors that we do, but their brain chemistry is obviously significantly less advanced, right? Their brains are like the size of a pen needle. But the dopamine and the serotonin receptors work very similarly. And he was talking about how with regard to the whole success and failure thing, right? Where you know, if you get to 50 and you feel good, but you go to 49, you feel like you failed. And it's really there's actually some physiological reasons for that. And they actually he showed with the way that the lobsters work that they get into battles, right? And they battle with each other. And if you lose a battle, they immediately drop to the very bottom of the food chain, right? So it's like you could be the king lobster, and you're like, you win this battle, you win the next 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 battle. But the moment that they lose a battle, they never win a battle again in the rest of their lives, right? And they just go and they become a shell of their former selves because of the way the chemicals work in their brains, and whatnot. They just shut down, right? And we work and operate very similarly on a instinctual level. So it's like you're winning and you're winning, and the first time you have a loss, it's like it feels like everything is ended, right? Like you haven't gotten anywhere. So there's like some actual like science behind that feeling. We have more advanced brain chemistry and whatnot that allows us to overcome that. But it's really fascinating to just sort of know how that works. And anyways, on that whole thing, I'm really glad that you chose to choose life and to choose to continue sharing your stories, because people get a lot of value probably out of what you do and what you put out into the world and the stories that you share.
Well, and that story is like one of the most powerful stories that I have, has turned into one of the most powerful stories that I have, because after that book, not only is it a story of like just raw openness, but after that happened, I made a decision, 3 decisions. First, I was going to bring back Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, and that ended up being our most successful launch of last year. It raised 10 times more than the other like 8 launches that I had that year. So it showed that there was success. I then did took the Godsverse Chronicles and I relaunched them on Kickstarter, and they made they made 10 grand in like 10 days, which is quadruple or something what they made all the entire 2019. And then I relaunched our second Cthulhu is Hard to Spell book, and that made $31,000, and that just finished about a month and a half ago. So after those, like that making $2 grand in 6 months, I went and I made $26,000 to $50,000 in the next 3 launches, because I went back to our first principles. I went back to the products that like made us successful in the first place, and I really decided that I was going to decide. I was going to have to figure out like if the books were broken, or if my audience suddenly hated everything that I did, or if it was a platform, and like what the real process was. And it turns out that we turned it around pretty good. Like from that first launch started in September, and so roughly about 3 months ago, 3 months from now last year, I went from my lowest point to one of my highest points of my career, being able to bring back one of my most beloved properties.
That's a really cool story. So my next question for you has to do with your common enemy, and I would like to frame this in the Creative Academy, right? That you have, the Complete Creative, is that right?
Yes.
And the common enemy is the thing that you are constantly sort of fighting against with your clients, right? The thing that you're banging your head against the wall. If you had your magic wand and every client who came through your academy, you could just tap them on the head and fix that like sort of mindset or problem that you're running into. What is that thing that you know your clients could get better, cheaper, faster, higher degree of results if they could just change this one thing or change this on one understanding? What would that sort of be for creatives who are trying to become successful?
Well, I mean, I always try and tell them to go through my build a rabid fan base course. But the thing that they don't understand is that they have to keep finding new people forever, because people will churn. You know, even in the best business, even in the best run business in the world, there's a 10% churn. I mean, I know it's a little bit less than that, but you can expect a 10% churn in any business that you start, even if you're doing everything perfectly. And so, even if you have 1,000 fans now, you're only going to have 900, and then you're going to have 810, and then you're going to have, like, it's going to go down every year. So you have to fill up at least 12 to 15% of new rabid fans consistently. So that means filling up, finding a bunch of people, finding hundreds of thousands maybe of people that you talk to who are nobody, and making them and turning them into like 100 or 200 new fans, because they will churn. Especially your casual fans. The rabid fans, the ones that really love your work, they probably aren't going to churn nearly as much as like 10%. But overall, you're going to get a 10% churn in your company. And so people like to believe that they can do one marketing activity one time, and then and then that's it. In fact, I've got a lot of people who
and then ride on the coattails of their success forever.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot of people who I built mailing lists and social media accounts for people, and you would be amazed at the percentage of people who get that list from me at the end once we've done all of the work to build it, and they literally never use it. And I know they never use it because I join every mailing list just to see if they ever use it. And at least 50%, and probably more like 70% of people literally never send an email through it. And then I never see them again. And then when I talk to them, they say it didn't work. I'm like, you didn't work because you literally never sent an email. I know you didn't send an email. And the ones who do,
you're like,
any
I'm on your list.
activity,
I never got one.
Yeah. The advantage of doing any marketing activity, no matter what that marketing activity is over time, to find new people. It could be doing new podcast appearances. It could be doing guest blog posts. It could be whatever the thing is going to have such a magnitude impact over time. And that's the second part of this, because like these things compound on top of each other. They don't work like one podcast appearance does nothing, but a podcast appearance or two a week over the course of a year does a huge amount of good for your business. And what it does is not drive sales.
I can see that in my own business too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it doesn't drive sales in the way that you think. What it does is marketing and sales are two different components. And people have argued with me when I've told people what I believe marketing is and what I believe sales is, but I'm going to do it again. And maybe we can have a discussion about it. Sales are immediate drivers of money. If you're like you are sending someone to a landing page to buy that moment. Marketing is about lowering the cost of the sale later. And so when you are on all of these podcasts or doing these guest blog posts or doing in these Facebook groups, doing group takeovers or whatever the thing you're doing joint ventures, what you're doing is not necessarily making a sale today. What you're doing is driving people into your mailing list or just getting the exposure so that the 10th time they see you, the next time they see you with a sales driver in front of them, they will buy. Instead of Russell Brunson talked about this a couple of years ago, where he made some video with Dan Harmon, the Harmon brothers, not Dan Harmon, the Harmon brothers, the guys who did the Squatty Potty or the unicorn poop one, and they he drove his cost of trial from $150 to $50 on that one singular video. So he cut the cost of his acquisition by $100 a person. And that is what, for me, that is what consistent marketing is about. It's about driving the cost down, the cost of an acquisition over time, and wearing people down so that you eventually, after a year or 2 years or 2 months or 2 days, they go, all right, I trust that Russell is the authority in this space, and I am ready to go buy from him now, or at least consider buying from him. And it was the same process I used at shows. I would do shows for years, and I would never get a sale from a person. But eventually, after 6 months or a year or 10 shows or whatever it was, I had wearing down that person enough that they've seen me enough that suddenly selling them was easy. And then selling them the next time was very easy. So it took time to wear it down, and you have to be in front of people for a long time, a bunch of times in a bunch of different ways. You can't just do it once. I see all of these ads that are sent to me because I track these, and like you probably wouldn't be, but like people, I am amazed at how often people send me emails or send me Facebook ads just long enough for me to consider them, and then they suddenly go away. So 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever it is, and then I never hear from them again. Whereas there are people like Frank Kern who, like, I will never buy a Frank Kern product just because I just won't do it. Not because I don't like him or anything. I've never found a product that resonated with me, but I dang sure know who Frank Kern is. And I will never forget who Russell Brunson is, because like they are constantly in front of me forever. And I know exactly the product that they sell.
Mm-hmm.
And if ever I wanted to spend $200 a month on doing funnels, if that ever became a part of my business, they would be the first person that I went to. And so that is the thing that I wish more people knew, that marketing is about consistently reaching out to people over months, years, decades, because McDonald's didn't get to be McDonald's overnight, and they don't stay McDonald's because they're not out there marketing. They have been, even when they became successful, they just made marketing a part of their life and a part of their business because they knew they had to keep being out there so that they wouldn't be forgotten. And so many of my clients end up being forgotten or never found because they don't even do the work of doing it consistently.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts on that. One, I completely agree with you. We have a lot of campaigns that we actually tell our clients to run. I got one of them I call a centrifuge funnel, which is entirely based on just showing up in someone's feed on a regular basis, and in all of the various places that you could be in their feeds, whatever that feed is, whether it's billboards on the street or the Facebook news feed, whatever. You want to be there constantly. And I tell people all the time that the biggest thing that you're fighting in the sales of people who would buy from you at some point, right? Of your potential customers, right? Because there are people who are never going to buy from you for no matter what. They're not your customers. But in the group of people who are potentially your customers, the biggest thing that you're fighting against is getting them at the right time, right? And it's like they might know you, they might like you, they might trust you, but getting them to sit down and actually pull out their credit card and spend money with you, right, is like getting all the stars to line up, right? There has to not be an entertaining cat video and not some political scandal that they're watching, and not a big COVID crisis that's shutting down the world, and the kid has to not be screaming, and like all these things have to sort of line up into the right time for them to want to buy from you. So the way that that's going to happen is by you constantly being there. So when the right time happens, you're there, right? Because if you, we tell people all the time, like in the direct response world of marketing, right? We'll use something like Google Ads to run someone to a landing page, and we'll talk. The average really good landing page from a Google ad will convert 8 to 10% of people, right? So that means you send 100 people to that page that they went to Google and said, "My tooth hurts, find me a dentist," and you're one of the dentists that shows up there, and they click onto your landing page. Only 8 people out of those 100 will actually call your office. The other 91 people, right, they are still, like, their tooth still hurts, right? That's still a problem in their life, right? But maybe it doesn't hurt enough right now. Or maybe when they got to the landing page, something happened. Or maybe they got there and they don't have enough money right now. Or maybe, there's all these things that could happen. So the question is, what do you do with those other 91 people, right, who are potentially your audience? And that's where you have to come in and start being creative with your marketing and doing things like retargeting and doing things like showing up at the events and showing up online and doing podcast appearances. So everywhere that they go, they're seeing you, right? And being like, "Oh yeah, my tooth hurts and that guy knows how to fix my toothache," right? You want to be top of mind. So when they get to the point where they're like, "Okay, I really have to take care of this tooth. I can't handle it anymore." They're going to be like, "Oh, you know what? I need to call that guy because he fixes teeth." And that's how marketing is done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so simple. And I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. So a friend of mine runs a company called Bunyo Books. Actually, I don't know if it's Buno or Bunyo. Pretty sure it's Bunyo because it's an NEA. And he's been releasing this book called Warm Blood for a couple of months. He's been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. How much he and I've just keep seeing this image in my feed like every few days. And I'm like, man, that looks really good. it looks really good. Looks really good. And yesterday he's like, hey, it just released yesterday. And I was like, all right. And he's like, and it's only $10. I was like, oh, all right, man. Like, and I went and I bought it like that time at that moment because like the messaging was right and like it was out. It wasn't in pre-order and like and like I'm gonna deliver it. It's gonna be delivered in a couple of days, and I'm like really excited to like get this book because I've seen it a bunch of times and I've grown my affinity towards it over time. But that only happened because he didn't stop targeting me and getting stuff to my feed. And so often, there's another one. I'm just gonna go with another one because I just thought of it. It's like people think that marketing is disgusting. Like even the people that do it, but aren't like committed to it. Like they're like, oh, I don't want to be like spam to them. Like I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be like the thing. And I'm like, look, like here's the thing. Like you might not like Target ads or Target like stuff, but I guarantee you there are people out there like that wait all week to see what Target has on sale. Like that is their like holy grail of thing. Like they want to, they are waiting for that Sunday paper.
My mom loves Target.
Yeah, my mom would get the paper just to get the ad for Safeway or it's Ralph's over here or Vaughn's or whatever it is, like the food store. Like she would wait. To me, that's garbage. But to her, it was like the reason to get the paper because she would then see what the sales were on that for that week. It could be clothes, it could be books, whatever the thing is. It might be trash to you, but every single person I've ever met has some email that they're happy to get, that they're excited to get every week because it might be like an inspirational thing. It might be like a Groupon ad thing, but whatever it is, they are excited to get it. And I wish people would start thinking about not that their stuff is spam, but how do they find the people who are going to treat their email like like the treasure that it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's just understanding who your people are, right? And realizing because it's a mistake I think a lot of entrepreneurs make is they try to think that their business is for everyone, right? And if someone doesn't like it, that your business isn't likable, right? Or your product isn't likable, and that's not true, right? Doesn't matter what you do, somebody hates your business, right? There's people who would not eat at McDonald's if you paid them handsomely to do so, right? But there's a lot of people that love McDonald's, right? And
I'll give you another example of something that happened to me this week. I ran a big promotion for like a big Star Wars giveaway. A lot of the stuff that I did in the past was like giveaways, targeted giveaways for like to brands. And I've added them to my main email list. And I'm about to release a new book Kickstarter in a couple of weeks. And so I sent out like the fantasy sampler of like all the books and like the first couple of chapters of each book. And like, they're quite good. But someone emailed me back and said, I only collect Star Wars stuff. And I went in and I unsubscribed them and I deleted their email. And I said, if you're in the, like that's great. You're in the wrong place. So like I went in and I unsubscribed you because like, I don't want you to be getting these emails if all you're looking for is Star Wars stuff. This is nothing against you. Like, you get to do, I didn't say all of this, but like there's nothing against that person. It's just, if he wants Star Wars memorabilia, like I am not the right person to give it to him. And so I would rather have him gone. Even if it could, maybe in 3 years, like I could wear him down and he would try one of my books. There is almost no chance he would ever become a real fan of my work because like he wants Star Wars stuff and he works hard. Like let him have his Star Wars stuff. But I don't want him on my mailing list because the last thing that I want is to be spam to anyone because this work is hard. This work is so hard when you have an audience that loves you. It's hard enough to be out there every week, like basically bleeding to find new people and showing that, like, and showing yourself. And like these ads, they're so bad. A lot of these ads for like micro targeting offers, and like I just roll my eyes at all of them because they're all done. Like they look the same and they're all terrible. But at the same time, I have to be like, man, but you're trying to be out here. And like, it must be so hard to know you have a product that's good and just be trying to figure out how to make it work and how to make it resonate and how to make it resonate with the right people and all of that stuff. Like it's really hard to do that. And if I have to then go and say, oh, and people think my thing is spam, I would freaking just walk away now. Cause like, it's hard enough to communicate with people that when I think that they love my work, if I had to now think that they didn't love my work, because the truth is they do. I talk to artists all the time who are down on their work, artists who I like, and they're like, and I tell them when they're insulting their work or saying it's not good, it's like that is really insulting to me, man. They always get taken back, and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm insulting them. It's like, no, I think your work is good, and if you're saying your work is bad, then you are saying that my taste is bad, and I know my taste is friggin' stellar. So either you have two choices. You can either stop insulting me, or you can insult me and I'm not going to buy from you again. So like, is your intention to insult your best fans? So yeah, that's my ramble.
That is
like
brilliant. That's brilliant. If you take nothing else from this thing, that's this whole fascinating conversation, take that, right? Because so many people I talk to, they don't like their own things. And that's a great way to frame it in your head. Realize that, hey, you have people who love your work. Don't insult them by saying your work isn't good or worthwhile.
I'll be honest though, some people really do need to work on their work, and like it's not good. And like those people tend to be like way too confident in their work and think it's amazing. So this is not, if you're like still working on your stuff and like you're not sure that but like once you have fans who actually buy your stuff and enjoy it, like it is absolutely insulting to them to say. It's not insulting to them to say, I really want to get better. I want to make this even better for you, and like way more intent and but buy better gear, or like try a better artist, or I have a different story, or like I think this story you're going to love. Also, all of that stuff is like absolutely valid to like grow, but you can't then be like, oh, well, like this stunk.
Yeah, it's part of that people talk about the imposter syndrome all the time, right? So, and I always tell people, like, there's two parts to the imposter syndrome. You're either an imposter, in which case you have to improve, or you have imposter syndrome, which means your stuff is good and you just think it isn't.
Well, and there's a thing where, like, look, there's a lot of artists who have a very niche style, and they can then reach out and try a more mainstream style. I particularly like a couple of my friends' styles. But like, I look at them and I'm like, this is never going to catch on. Like, it's just never going to catch on. Like, it's beautiful, but it is too niche, and you will have to do too much. It's not that it can't catch on. You will have to do too much work to get it to catch on, that I think you will give up before then, or you are going to like run out of money to continue on this runway. So there is that. There is some people who are bad. There is some people who need to like make a more mainstream thing. But for the majority of people who are professionals just need to objectively understand that like they can't be bad if a bunch of people buy and enjoy their stuff, because if they are, then they're insulting the people that buy those things.
Absolutely.
Speaking of heroic tools, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about a tool we built that powers the Hero Show and is now this show's primary sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. You're listening to The Hero Show, unlocking the power of influence and success.
So this has been a really fascinating conversation. I do want to bring it home for our listeners a little bit. One more question for you. Top 1 or 2 principles or actions that you put in place every single day that you think contribute to your success and the influence that you have in your space. Maybe something you wish you had known when you started out all those years ago.
All right, I'm not going to do the one that I normally do because I got that in the middle of the show about the self-worth and the treatment. So I will say every day I try to do one action at least that will move me forward in some way. I believe very deeply in the one thing, and having one big overarching principle that has many little pieces underneath it that you can work towards. And my goal is to do um, a podcast record, or to write pages, or to do a blog post, or to find a strategic partnership, or to do something, not read or like research, but like something actionable that I can put forward in that day. I can't say whether 5 people or 5 million people will listen to this interview, but I can say that like I did this interview. And I don't know if 1 person or 1 billion people will read a blog post or a book that I read, but I can do those pieces with intention. And it is the with intention that I think so many people don't follow up on. They just scattershot. I'm very intentional why I can't do this show. A, it's about comics, and B, it's about business. And like, if there are 2 things that I am known for, it is comics and business. So like, it's very intentional of me being on this show, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who, including the host, hopefully, who resonates with the message that I have. It's not just like I'm not going on mommy blogs, because like the propensity for someone that like is listening to a show about parenting to like want to do business is low, or want to talk about comics is low, unless there was one that was about like that thing. So I'm trying to intentionally move my business forward with little actions that can then compound over time. For podcasts, it takes roughly 8 to 12 weeks from record for you to actually be on the air. Generally, like that's usually the backlog of like a podcast. So you have to and then it takes kind of a month to schedule that podcast. So like you could start doing something today and it won't pay off for 4 months, but you have to do it with the intention of that it's going to pay off, and then it's going to keep compounding, because once those shows then start coming out in earnest, and you then have a pipeline of like the next shows and the next shows and the next shows that are coming out.
Yeah.
And I worked in sales, so I know that the thing that you do today is predictive of what happens 8 weeks from now. I used to be a sales manager, and I would train this into my people as often as possible. The reason why you're having these big fluctuations is because when you're at a high, you take your foot off the gas. When you're at a low, you work triple or quadruple. And so you have these like feast or famine months. If you just did not take your foot off the gas, you could go 40 instead of 80, and you could be doing 40 for every month, and you would get further than doing 40 and then 20 and then 0 and then 80, and then you would be able to do
tortoise
more.
and the hare, right?
Exactly. And you can then go, if you're doing 40, you can then go 45 or 50, or you can sort of inch up over time. But, it's very hard to go from 0 to 80 and then from 80 to something higher. So I just know that if I can do I have 2 businesses, and if I can do something for both of them in a day, that's great. But if I can do something for one of them in a day, then that's awesome too. And it could be, before we got on this call, I told you that I did a bunch of ads for I set a bunch of ads for one of my book series. Yesterday it was a writing day, so I did a blog post for The Complete Creative, and I did 5,000 words of writing. Today I did a little bit of work for the Wannabe Press, and I'm going to be on records basically from now until 6 o'clock of different types, talking about The Complete Creative. So my goal is to do at least one thing every day that can compound over time. The second thing that I try to do every day is learn something. So the podcast is a great example. I was floundering on like what to do to get booked on podcasts or do anything until I went to Podcast Movement in February, and they kind of put all of the pieces in place. They told me where to go. told me the Facebook groups to join, told me the websites to try. And I tried one, and then I found another one. And now I found two. And then I found like two Facebook groups, and then I found four. And I like kind of built out. And now every morning I kind of have a process where like I check 3 or 4 podcast sites to see what's new, the new on the platform. I check my messages. I then go to a couple of Facebook groups, and I just do it like sort of it's an ingrained part of my day once I have a habit. But I try and learn a thing, read a thing, and then implement something new, once a week overall. And if I can just keep adding, again, on aggregate, 1 thing a week, 2 things a week, little by little by little, suddenly like people say like, how can you be so productive? I'm like, I don't feel productive. I just feel like now when I look back even a couple of months ago, I couldn't have had 6 podcasts booked in one day before. I couldn't have done any of that stuff because I wasn't in a position to understand the mechanics of it. But little by little over the last few months, I've been able to build up, knowledge about how all of this works. And I've been able to figure out how to pitch somebody better. I've been able to, because I've been on so many podcasts, that 1 to 10 to 100 to 1,000 was literally all built from like doing a bunch of podcast interviews and figuring, and like the process sort of started making sense. Because when you're a guest, it's different than being a host. You've got to like have the process, you've got to have the systems, you've got to have the value. And so those 2 things end up then compounding on top of each other. So you're doing this, you're like trying to do 1 thing a day, or a couple of things a day, hopefully, but 1 thing a day. And then you're trying to learn something and implement something new. And suddenly like they're compounding on top of each other, and all of them are moving in one direction. And that is the most important part, because so often when I talk to businesses, they are doing everything scattershot, and like they have 6 different plans, and like they're all going in different directions, and like they have no idea like what each thing is driving to the same. So they're not able to compound those things and make 1 thing work for 5 or 6 different things. So the most important thing you can do is that 1 thing and learn that thing, but then focus it to 1 point, or in my case, since I have a publishing company and a creative academy, 2 points. But they all kind of work together, because when I find someone for the complete creative, they often tend to read my books. And if a creator reads my novels, and then it will almost always come over to the complete creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important point too, is learning how to just stack wins, right? And it's one of the things that like I learned a long time ago. And now, right, I remember in my business being at a place where I thought it was like, in order to succeed, I needed to put in 18-hour days, right? And that's hard to do, right? So I was like, I can work 12 hours a day, and I would do 12 hours a day all the time. And I was like, I hadn't earned freedom, right? I hadn't earned freedom. So I just like, I would work and I would eat and I would sleep, and that was it. And realized that it's actually holding me back. Because you're doing all the scattershot stuff, and you're just trying everything, you're doing all the things. And I've realized that once you sort of put I tell people creativity thrives with restrictions, right? And so if you give yourself like, hey, you need I'm only going to work 4 hours a day, or I'm only going to work 6 hours a day, or I'm only going to work 4 days a week, or I'm only going to do these kind of things. And you have to be prioritized. What's the thing that I can fit into that time? Like the stuff that's really good. And then you start working on stuff that's better. Nowadays, my work week is, I work 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, right? And my businesses are 4 times bigger than they were 3 years ago. Because you're working on important things. And you stack those things up over time, and they really, really grow for you. And, the podcast thing is fascinating, right? Because I just started my podcast. I call it Podcast Tour, right? Where we started going on podcasts every week. Earlier, when did we start? It was been like November of this last year. And we bumped it up to, I was doing like 1 a month for like half of last year. And then we bumped it up to 1 a week this year. It's amazing what that does over the course of time, right? Now,
Absolutely.
Like people all over the place knew who I am and what I'm doing and what I stand for. And it's helping our businesses grow. And like, I'm getting to a point now where it's like, those are some of the most important things I do in my business. It's like, I got my podcast that I got this week, and I got the guest interviews that I got on my show. And like, if I do nothing else in my business will grow because of those things.
Awesome. So
And
there's an article that I
so,
put on my website a
yeah.
couple of weeks ago. Well, it was today now, but by this time it's called "You Can't Plug the Holes in Your Business with Tape and Gum Forever," and with gum and tape forever. And it literally goes through the process of how you can figure out the things that are the most impactful for your business and the most fun for your business, like your zones of genius, and which things you can cut, which things you should outsource. It is kind of my guide to making sure that you're going in the right direction. But you really do, in my book, How to Become a Successful Author, I talk about the one thing. And it's like, if you have this thing up here that is guiding you, then you know that everything has to go into one direction. And the things that don't help you go in that direction, they get cut. And the things that don't go in that direction profitably, they get cut. And the things that go into the business and don't see return and take a lot of time, but don't see a lot of, they get cut. And suddenly you're moving everything in one very, very, very easy direction. And it's very easy to say when someone comes to you with an offer, does this move my company forward in the way I want it to move? And if the answer is no, you say thank you and no. And if it does, then you have to decide if you're under leveraged, which it sounds like you are, so you can take that time. I try and be under leveraged too, so that when an opportunity comes up, I can very easily say, yes, I will spend the next month doing this thing. And it might take an extra 2 hours a day, but I have that time. And then if something is not moving that forward, or I don't think there'll be a big return, or it will take me too much time, I say absolutely not. But it's because I have that guiding light of what is the goal that allows me to focus everything so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important point too, right? Is like knowing exactly what you need to do and whether or not it fits. And right, I have my litmus test that I use in my business. So like, does this help me, hit this goal or not? And if it doesn't, I don't even consider it anymore. And it's really helpful for fighting that shiny object syndrome that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with earlier on in their careers. So that basically wraps up our interview, but I do have one last thing we do at the end of all of our interviews, something I call the Heroes Challenge. It's pretty simple. It's basically this. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come on the Hero Show and share their story?
Sure. So I've talked about Sherry Fink a couple of times, so I'm going to go with her. She and her husband Derek run a website called The Whimsical World. They do children's books and young reader books and middle grade fiction books. And she's got to be the most inspirational human I ever met. She is incredibly hardworking. She does like 100 school appearances a year, her and her husband. And
Wow.
they built this amazing, amazing brand based on this book called The Little Rose, which was on the top of the children's book chart for 50 weeks straight. And so
Damn.
they, especially because you want to do children's books, your wife does, I think would be a perfect person to have on this show. Plus, she is just filled with amazing entrepreneurial knowledge.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll reach out and see if we can get her onto the show. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Russell. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation to talk through all of these things and just the creative aspects of business. Last thing, where can people find you and who are the right types of people to reach out?
All right. So I have two, because I'm a writer and a creative trainer. So if you are a creative human or you just want to learn how to do your business better, then thecompletecreative.com has a podcast, epic blog posts like the 5 ways to build your audience without breaking the bank, free courses. You can get to my audience building course if you'd like to learn more about that 1, 10, 100, 1,000 strategy we're talking about at thecompletecreative.com/audience. So who should come and over there? If you've been struggling with your business and you don't know how to break to the next level, if you're great at making content already, but you're just not building an audience, you're not making money, you're not able to scale, you feel like you're banging your head against the wall, those are the people that I can help really well. if you have even a little bit of an audience, if you've even got an inkling of a product that sold a couple of books, that sold a couple of times, this is the kind of thing for you, especially if you're making products. It's not that I can't help services, but I really, really, really can help people that are trying to build a product-based business that can scale and that they can use to do a whole bunch of other stuff, whether that's do movies and TV or speaking engagements or anything else. My most popular product is called Build a Rabid Fan Base, which is not even available on my site right now. But it shows you basically how to go from 0 to a bevy of rabid fans. Okay, so that is the thing that I do. The thing that I am most identified with is as a writer. It is the closest thing to my personal heart. I'm a USA Today best-selling author, so I'm pretty good at it, especially when it involves magic, mythology, and monsters. If you love comics, I recommend you checking out Ichabod Jones' Monster Hunter. It's about a psychopath that escapes from mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter, but doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time. It's very much like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac or The Max or Legion, but with it's quite funny, very violent, and it does have that mind screwery effect. If you like anthologies, then My Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthology is a great anthology about Lovecraft. Lovecraft believed that if you looked upon the eyes of the monsters in his universe, you would go insane. And maybe that's why everything's so crazy now, because I came out with this book a few years ago and it's just exploded on the chart because it is all about the gods and monsters themselves. You don't see that a lot. And so I really wanted to make something that was sort of about the gods and monsters. And finally, if you're a novel person, this is where I've done the most work in the past couple of years on a product called, or a book series called The Godsverse Chronicles. It is all gods are real. They're just kind of dicks. It's full of mythology, monsters, and magic. The first book, And Demons Followed Behind Her, is absolutely free right now on all platforms, and you can get it anywhere that books are sold and try it out. So those are my two. Go pick up And Demons Follow Behind Her or one of my other books at russellnohelty.com/books with an S. Book will take you to somewhere else, or just russellnohelty.com. And you can sign up for my mailing list to get a bunch of additional free books like Ichabod, the original graphic novel for Katrina, some stories about Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, and a whole bunch more at russellnohelty.com. And then thecompletecreative.com has my podcast archives, where I interview successful creators about how they built and sustained their careers, epic blog posts, free courses, and a whole lot more at thecompletecreative.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that, Russell. It has been, like I said, a really cool conversation to talk to someone who is doing creative work at your level, right? And we know we mentioned this early in the interview. There's not a lot of people who are best-selling authors and going direct to consumer, right? It's very rare. So it was really cool to sort of peek behind the curtain and see how you're doing that. So again, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing as much as you did. Before we finish this up, do you have any final words of wisdom before I hit this little stop record button?
Yes. I'm going to go back to the self-worth thing. Just remember that all you have is the work that you've done. And if you can be proud of the work, then that's everything.
I completely agree. Thank you so very much, Russell.